Hi, and welcome to the Beyond the Falls podcast. Today I've got Jacob Otte with Otte Home Services.
Glad to be here.
Thanks, Jacob. I like to start out by asking my first question, as always, what's your connection to River Falls?
I mean, I grew up here, went to school here. I mean, not much else, to be honest. I'm pretty involved in the community and just in terms of sports and stuff, and now I'm even more involved with my business, so.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah.
And that's why we're here. I want to talk about your business a little bit. You tell us a little bit about the scope of work that you offer to clients.
So I primarily work with all sorts of construction, pre-existing, brand new commercial, and then brand new residential. And right now I'm doing a lot of flooring trim, windows, doors. I do a lot of drywall patching and then painting of units, and then I also do junk removal for just a lot of times when people are moving homes. They just want to get their stuff out of there. And then I do take on like remodels all the time as well, but that's just kind of as they come along. I don't necessarily, I do have like renovation and repair in my like job title, but I kind of just take that as it comes. I don't really like push that work just because it's kind of few and far between.
Yes.
So.
Yep. So kind of as little of a project as somebody might have to bigger ones, and you are a licensed contractor, which is important to know, licensed and insured. I think people like to know that.
Yeah.
What was your inspiration? What made you decide to start your own business?
Probably just like I've always been like kind of a serial entrepreneur, I guess. And like the second I even started working for Dan, I started like, well, what if you did it this way? And he's like, oh yeah, that's probably a good idea. And so then I was just like, well, he primarily takes on like new construction, building homes, and also managing properties. And so I was like, why? And he started passing along projects to me. And so I was like, why wouldn't I just make a business out of it? So I kind of just made the business and then decided. It just kind of snowballed into doing a lot of like repair work, like you mentioned earlier. I guess Dan kind of nudged me a little bit, and then I just decided to register an LLC. So
there you go.
Yeah.
And it's been great to have you too, because I know you've done some work for clients for me in the past as well, and you've always done a really nice job. So thank you for that. What are some general home maintenance tips you would have for homeowners going into these colder months and the snowier months?
So first things first, always just safety of the people, of all the homeowners out there, to make sure your sidewalks are clean, because the last thing you want is to slip on some ice. So as long as you keep that, as much as people don't hate to shovel, as long as you shovel pretty often, that buildup of snow should allow that lower layer to melt and not freeze over. And then a lot of things.
Probably not going to have a winter like last year where there's two times we had to shovel.
This year is definitely going to be way worse. But yeah, and then just like making sure there's no like really holes in your house, any places for water penetration, because like one of the main things with homes and codes and everything is a lot to do with ice dams and stuff. Because the last thing you want to do is have water get into your ceiling, because that water's not going to. It's not going to like mold or anything right away. It's just going to freeze. So if you have a hole in your roof and across that whole winter, water's going to keep seeping in there, freezing, seeping in there, freezing. Like that's all that's going to happen. And then when the summer rolls around, you're going to have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So, and then like interior wise, just making sure your AC's running, because the last thing
Furnace,
yeah, sorry. Make sure your furnace is running, because the last thing you're going to want is your furnace breaking down and now you're lighting candles in the house or something to keep yourselves warm.
So speaking of furnaces, what would you suggest as terms of maintenance?
Just doing like a general checkup on your furnace, really making sure everything's working properly, running the full cycle in your home, making sure it's kicking out the air, working well with your thermostat. Your thermostat's, it's kicking out as much heat as you want with your thermostat. And then it's also not a horrible idea to hire like an HVAC company you don't have to do it every year, but at least like probably every 2 to 3 years, just to do a service check.
Yeah.
Make sure your furnace is working fine.
Switching out filters too.
And switching out your filters. A lot of people like to neglect that, but it doesn't, it just more makes your furnace work more, which obviously wears and tears on your furnace, and then also just your quality of air.
Yep.
So.
And I have heard from one of our HVAC contractors, it's important to switch it out as we get into the really colder months. Once a month, he suggests.
Yes, yeah.
So frequent switches it is important.
Yeah, and
to keep the furnace going.
And those filters are not that expensive. That filter cost, doing general servicing on your filters is going to be way cheaper in the long run than when your furnace goes out or you're out of heat. You'd probably rather spend that $10 to keep your filter keep your filter clean than not have any heat. So
yeah, having to call the HVAC specialist to come in. So
yeah, and pay their.
There's a lot of snowbirds here. People that are going to leave for the colder months. What's your suggestion to them on preparing their home for the winter? Maybe they're not going to be there. Do you suggest winterizing?
Really just going through the general winterization process, making sure you're shutting off certain things like your furnace and everything, but you don't want to, obviously you don't want your house to be freezing when you come back. So I've heard a lot of times people have their furnace just on 55, and then sometimes I've even heard of people having a service person come through and just make sure that their house is looking not up to date, just working properly and not nothing bad happened. No electrical fire or anything crazy. But then a lot of the time, a lot of things that people don't do is unplugging certain things. Unplugging certain, you can keep your fridge running, obviously, your freezers and everything, so your food stays fine. But things you're just a power strip, those get a lot of power draw, and there's always a chance that those could short out and start an electrical fire. So yeah, that's really the bigger problem, is little things like that could end up combusting and burning your house down. So
yeah, that'd be terrible. So I'm going to move on from winter now. First-time home buyers, I work with a lot of them. What are some general tips any time of year that you'd suggest for first-time home buyers as they're learning to own their first home?
I would say generally number one thing is insulation, I would say, as a homeowner, because utility bills can be very expensive, and with inflation obviously that just gets even more expensive. And a lot of the things that people neglect is their insulation in their home. They're oh, why are my energy bills so high? I've been shutting my lights off, not using water and all this other stuff, and it's you just have bad insulation. So it's not a bad idea to check your attic insulation before you buy the home, or have a contractor go up there and look at the home. Yeah. And then another thing is looking for underlying issues. A lot of the times, in that attic, with the previous client, I had to go up in her attic, and then she found ended up finding out there was a penetration in the roof, and her the decking on her roof started rotting out. And so it's little things like that. You want to make sure that there's just nothing that could cause your home to bring you more expenses, unless you're looking at a home to fix up, where it might cause you more expenses, but if you were to fix it yourself, that would end up being cheaper in the long run. So another thing is your roof. That's a big one, is always make sure you got a nice roof, make sure it's built to code, proper flashing, because the last thing you want is one of your walls to rot out. So
yes, that would not be fun. If we were wanting to get in touch with you, if somebody out there is looking for a handyman to come help with a project, how do we get a hold of you?
So they could either look at my website, audihomeservices.com, or they could email me at jacob@audihomeservices.com, or even call me. Should I just say my phone number?
Go for it.
Or call me at 715-531-3751. And then I usually respond pretty fast. Yep. I'm a young kid with little responsibilities, so I don't have much stuff outside of work, so I'm usually able to get out there pretty soon. And I was swapping out a window and a door with a headlamp on at 11 p.m. a week ago, so if it needs to be done, I usually get it done pretty quick.
That's awesome. So. It's nice, and it's nice to hear that there's a quick response time too. Sometimes I know in the past few years, we've been shorthanded on this kind of service, and so it's nice to know that there's a person there that's going to respond quickly. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to add that maybe we didn't go over?
Other than, I mean, unless you're looking to buy a home, you got Sarah right here. But no, unless, I guess one thing I will say is just because I work an awful lot with landlords of rentals as well.
Yep.
So one of the biggest things I got to say is just don't be afraid to reach out to a management company, because I've seen so much where they get overwhelmed with the work, and then that's when you turn into, like, I haven't really seen it personally, but that's when they often turn into a slumlord, where they just slap a Band-Aid on the place just to get out of there and satisfy the homeowner, when you could just not dump it off per se, but just leave that up to a property management company who will deal with all of that for you. So
That's good advice.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Jacob, for joining me today, and we'll see you on the next episode of Beyond the Falls.